I haven't gotten the opportunity to discuss a major element to my overall healing. And that element comes down to the word trust. And so much of my overall healing and personal development came down to entrusting in a force and energy that cannot be seen. To grow your connection with Source, to grow your connection with whatever you deem as being God, and to touch on ancient practices and to bring in those powers, those practical practices into your life with enthusiasm, with passion, so that you can begin to open your heart up to what's really possible for you, not only in terms of the modern world, but your connection to a deeper world, a spiritual world. I've seen many anxiety sufferers unable to navigate the spiritual connection to anxiety healing. So many people come to me over the past 15 years and say, well, Dennis, I'm not very spiritual, or I don't believe in X, Y, or Z. And what I can sense is confusion and fear. Fear of adopting a new approach to their overall healing. Confusion as to how to go about that healing, how to give themselves permission to believe in something new, to believe that they are not just a human doer, a human being, but they are a spiritual being having a human experience. And can this help with anxiety healing? Absolutely 100%. Because once the pressure is taken off of us to understand at a mental level in order to heal anxiety, once we give that up to a higher power, we tend to be connected to that higher power. That higher power is always looking to help us, to guide us. However, when we're so mentally fixated on trying to figure out our problems, we never have that. We never tend to sense that connection with that higher power. And I want you to understand something. It is that you can give yourself permission to be somebody else. You do not have to mirror or continue to mirror the people, your authority figures from your past or present. You can come into your own. You can uncover all those filters that are preventing you from seeing who you really are, your true self. There is a part of you that wants to be playful again. There is a part of you that wants to be open-hearted again. There's a part of you that wants to be empathetic and compassionate towards other people's problems within you. There is all of this. However, you've gotten to a place in your life where you've taken life so seriously in every aspect that all you can see is more problems and challenges. However, that's not really you. And through this podcast, we're going to dive deep into this conditioned you, move those layers out without fear, and allow ourselves to touch back, get back in touch with our true selves. We're not going to talk about any kind of woo-woo spiritual practices. We're not going to go there. We're going to talk about practical things. We're going to talk about what the ancients believed. We're going to talk about energetic practices. We're going to talk about the fact that you are energy, and that even though you're unconscious of other energies around you, you are always affected by those energies and affecting those energies. I'm going to show you how you can change and alter your energy on the inside to make a lasting difference on the outside. Because when you change who you are, everybody around you changes as well, not only perceptually, but energetically. You are going to be the light that you've always wanted to be. You are going to give yourself permission to cry. You are going to give yourself permission to feel all the negative feelings that you've been running from for so long. You are going to give yourself permission to reveal some of those past pains, look directly at them and re-perceive them. You are going to give yourself permission to be playful, loving again. You are going to laugh again. You are going to smile again, and not in an artificial sense, but in a natural and genuine sense, like you did when you were a child. We're going to bring back that child. We're going to let that child within you know that this world is safe. And that child no longer has to be threatened by every potential what if, every potential uncertain situation that may approach in the future. Many people out there have trouble giving themselves permission to follow a new spiritual path due to their upbringing and their core beliefs that keep them attached to the practices of others. As I mentioned, we're going to touch on this. We will also explore the ancient traditions that are not always available in the mainstream for obvious reasons. And we are going to learn and apply these teachings into our life to become more open-hearted and more open-minded. I am going to challenge you to truly open your heart up to allowing new and exciting spiritual principles to accompany you on your personal growth that will give you purpose and connections you likely have never felt, because for the last 15 years, I have gratefully been involved as a host for the Anxiety Guy podcast and the Health Anxiety podcast. And don't get me wrong, it has brought me to this very important chapter in my life. However, those podcasts speak in terms of a very small element of life called anxiety. That's the small portion. And if we continue to focus our entire attention on that small portion, we can never see the big picture. And if we never see the big picture, how can we allow ourselves to step out of our comfort zones? At this time, through so much inner healing work that I have done, so much meditation, so much trauma work, I've been through hell, and I have found heaven. I have also developed an intuitive sense that goes far beyond much of the cognitive solutions that you find in today's anxiety world. As I mentioned, I'm going to challenge you, and I want you to step up to those challenges, to no longer see something that you don't understand as being bad, but becoming more curious around those things, to say, you know what, I may not understand it right now. However, I am open-minded and open-hearted. In time, as long as I stay with this intention, I will understand. And some things are not meant to be understood. So why go and continue to look to bulldoze our way towards understanding, to bully the lower self or inner child into healing? No. You've been in a fear-centered trance for so long that you haven't even recognized that you've been living so artificially up to now. You've been living under a trance brought on by your own subconscious mind, your lower self. And your lower self has dictated every single decision that you've made. And you can't even do the simplest things without touching on the potential fear that may accompany you if you do them. Awakened is about waking you up out of that trance and putting you back in to a new kind of trance. And what I mean by that new kind of trance is one that is lightness, is one that allows themselves to go about life with ease, to allow themselves to no longer be addicted to suffering, but to say, I'm glad for the suffering. I'm glad for the blessings that anxiety has given me. And I no longer will wait for my healing. I will open myself up to potentials. I will find emotional balance. And once you find emotional balance, you realize that all the other things that you've been trying to do to help you with your mental health has all been a waste of time and energy. Emotional balance comes first. And in order for you to be truly emotionally balanced, you must trust. And to trust, we are going to begin tapping in to that part of you that is unconditionally loving, not conditionally loving, not the part of you that says, my day is only good if all these things on my checklist get checked. I mustn't have an intrusive idea. Nobody must treat me with disrespect. Nothing can go wrong in my day. I mustn't feel overwhelmed. Your checklist is so long that for so long you haven't had a good day. But we put that aside. There is no checklist anymore. The good and the bad are both good. Because the good tells you that you are aligned with your wonderful godly spiritual practices. You have let go. You have surrendered those things. And the bad teaches us that we are not aligned. We may not be aligned mentally, emotionally, behaviorally, imaginatively. And we no longer see those bad days as being bad, but we are grateful for those. And we take both of those kinds of days and we stay on this narrow path. I'm so excited to bring you along this journey of awakened. We're going to go exploring all sorts of ideas and concepts. And from me to you, I want you to truly know that I'm with you every step of the way. I've been where you are, challenged. I've had a lot of difficulty opening myself up to a new spiritual world. And I want to help guide you to that place once and for all, so that you can understand that it's always been within you. It's always been within you. And you no longer have to search for answers on the outside, because they will all come to you on the inside in time. Once you experience an awakening, you have such a profound shift perceptually and emotionally that you feel that you could never go back to your old belief systems and your old identity. Everything around you starts to look different. You feel more connected to everything rather than continue to compete with everything. You have compassion even for people that you used to despise, because you realize how valuable they are in the overall process of understanding, healing, and growth that you are under. You also realize that death is essential, because if you never died, you would never have such deep appreciation for what's taking place in this very moment. Therefore, you are much more present and content than you ever have been before in your life, simply knowing that one day you will pass away. It is a profound realization that can be explained to another person, but without the expectation of them understanding, unless they are as aligned with the universal consciousness that you have aligned yourself with. An awakening, my friends, is becoming aware of things you were never aware of before, along with no longer allowing your ego or lower self to direct you. You get to a point in your life where you say, I'm no longer going to react in line with this voice in my head. I'm no longer going to act in line with this initial feeling that I have towards something. This is a part of having an awakening. And it's very, very powerful. It's powerful, and it also takes a certain degree of courage to keep it going, because you will have moments of, let's say, weakness as you go about your life. You will have moments where you will agree with someone else who is not as aligned as you are. And in those very moments, you can start to doubt yourself and say, you know what? Maybe all of this is not worth pursuing. However, there is nothing more valuable than to continue to pursue your own enlightenment through this awakening that you are having. My friends, life after an awakening makes old problems look like petty occurrences. You're no longer sucked in to what feels like a big problem, because you realize how fleeting everything in life really is. So things that used to look like huge problems in the moment, or potential catastrophe in the future, you're just no longer willing to give so much focus and energy to those things. And notice that word that I used, energy. Because where your focus goes is where your energy flows to. So if I'm focusing on something that could go wrong, I'm giving that idea all of my energy. However, if I neutralize this and I get to a place where I finally start to allow life to unfold as it is, and to respect, this is very important, to respect life, even death, as being a part of the life cycle. When we start to respect that, now we are really starting to move on to the next level. And when we're talking about levels, it's like climbing a ladder. It's going from one step to the next. Your awakening and this realization isn't the end. More often than not, it's just the beginning. Life after an awakening makes old problems look like petty occurrences. As I mentioned, this is key, because you're no longer fixated. You're no longer mentally fixated on what took place yesterday or 10 years ago, because you realize that the only reason that those catastrophic ideas are surviving, the only reason your victimization is surviving, is because of you. And you continue to give that same old idea the same amount of energy on a daily basis. And that's why they continue to survive. And as they survive, they tend to thrive. But we don't want those negative ideas to thrive. Therefore, we must understand that today's problems are tomorrow's fish and chips. And if you understand that and go hand in hand with your awakening, then you're going to get there to a place that you never thought you'd get to. An awakening can come to you spontaneously if you've placed an intention to no longer be led by the lower self or the ego. And it can also be the result of an action that you've courageously taken, which spurs on such deep clarity that you realize all the thinking in the world, all the thinking that you've done in the world could never bring you to the same place that you've just found yourself in. You realize how limiting your mind really is, at least your unconscious mind. And you start to look at the ideas that come from that unconscious mind, all the anger, all the sadness, all the fear, all the apathy, all the blame, all the guilt. You start to go, I can allow these things to play out as they want to. However, I will no longer attach myself to these things because I no longer identify with any of them. An awakening makes you identify with nothing. You are literally a nobody. And in today's world, in our modern motivational world, to be proud to say that you are a nobody will make you look kind of crazy to other people because you're supposed to be a somebody. You're supposed to shoot for the stars, right? You're supposed to climb the corporate ladder. However, an awakening takes you away from all that old conditioning, and you start to go for a walk, and you are content, and you realize that the fight for new relationships, the fight to be accepted by others, the fight to make more money, the fight to see as many places in the world as humanly possible, the fight to eat the best foods, the fight to have a bigger home, the fight to have a nicer car, the fight to be better than your neighbor. All of this fighting is nonsense. After the awakening, that's what it feels like. And so, we must understand that also within our collective evolution, the awakening is accelerating. It is accelerating right now in this time of our lives. More and more of us are asking questions that we've never had in mind before. People are questioning the status quo. They are realizing how duped they've been for years, thinking that they weren't allowed to believe something that may differ from another person's belief systems, especially their authority figures. And here's that word. You naturally give yourself permission to believe in something completely different. Completely different. And with this awakening, you realize that you no longer have to beg for your healing. You get to a point with this awakening further down the road where the physical body is loved and respected, but it doesn't matter as much as it used to. Because back during the days where you followed your ego and lower self, you always felt the need to protect from anything that could go wrong to your physical body. A certain degree of protection is normal. However, being obsessed with this to the point of such high anxiety is not right. And during this awakening, you're going, hey, even this meat suit that I'm going around with on a daily basis is just a meat suit. And below that meat suit is a soul. It's a spirit that is finally allowed permission, finally allowed to come out and have a say in how we go through this life experience. No longer are you second-guessing yourself, questioning whether you're doing something right or wrong, yada, yada, yada. But rather, you are spontaneous. You are allowing lightness to come into your life, and all of this is because of your awakening. Now, here's the key. Keep listening to what the awakening is telling you, right? Keep listening to what the awakening is telling you. If it's telling you that you should adopt this kind of idea, adopt it. If it's telling you to start acting in this way, start acting that way. If it's telling you to speak up at times where you just really want to share your ideas with other people courageously, speak up. Because an awakening and suppression don't go hand in hand. An awakening and expression do go hand in hand. So you can express that smile that you want to express now. In the morning, when you walk by your neighbors, you can say, "Good morning, neighbor." Aren't we lucky to have this day? And guess what? It does not matter what the neighbor says. And that's the beauty of this awakening. My friends, I hope I've shed some light today on what an awakening is. And if you've experienced any of this, then I commend you. I look up to you and I honor you. And there will come a time where you will need to kind of give back, because there's always going to be that feeling of, wow, I wish I could share some of this with the world. And when you become true to that and start giving back to others in a way that feels right for you, now you're moving up another step on that ladder. Thoughts. You have them. I have them. The question is, what kind of thoughts are you giving priority to, attention to, energy to? And what sort of things can we do with these thoughts in order to align ourselves with who we are becoming? I want to dive deep into our thoughts. And I want to see these thoughts from the perspective of myself who has become awakened. Because if I explained thinking, thoughts, perception from the perspective of my old self, then what you would hear would be a lot of victimization, a lot of confusion and bewilderment. I didn't understand the idea that I didn't have to align myself, my behaviors, my actions, my beliefs with unconscious thoughts back then. I thought that because I had a thought, it was true, and that the right thing to do was to give it my focus, to give it my energy, and therefore behave in line with it. And then where that would take me unconsciously is a place of aligning my identity with those thoughts. However, there are 3 things that we can do with our thoughts. And I'm going to share those with you today so that you understand more deeply about these thoughts that you get on a daily, repetitive basis. Why am I doing this? Because I want you to begin to detach yourself from certain thoughts and attach yourself and align yourself with other thoughts. Because this is the true journey. This is when you start to separate from your past self and align yourself with your true self. Now, the first thing you can do with these thoughts is accept them for what they are and let them pass. Now, you may be asking, Dennis, how do we do that? Well, here's how. You accept your thoughts and let them pass by distinguishing where a thought comes from and why. Lower self or ego-run thoughts, they come rapidly, they come unconsciously, and they come repeatedly. And for the sole purpose of prolonging an emotional state that you've been invested in for so long. Many people come up to me and they ask me, well, Dennis, doesn't everybody get these kinds of intrusive, catastrophic thoughts? Well, here's the thing. If someone lives in a more positive emotional state, and that is their default state throughout the day, then they also will encounter a catastrophic or negative thought. But because they are so well practiced and aligned with that particular emotional state, the way they react and respond to that thought is different than someone who, let's say, has anxiety. The person with anxiety will take a catastrophic thought and believe in it wholeheartedly and feel like they need to protect from that thought. That becomes their reality. And that becomes the cycle that they find themselves in on a regular basis. Whereas the person within the emotional state of positivity, moving up into awakeness, moving up into enlightenment, moving up into mental clarity, this person understands where that thought comes from and why. Okay? So we need to distinguish one thought from another. If the thought is rapid, unconscious, and repeats itself consistently, then that's coming from the lower self/ego. That particular thought does not have any significance in your life other than the fact that it's connected to a negative emotional state that you found yourself in for too long. And it's kind of like a tug of war, where these thoughts are trying to tug you in one direction, and then through your willpower, you're trying to tug the other direction. Now, accepting your thoughts, these particular thoughts, and letting them pass, you can do a better job of this when you stop looking for things to do. When you sit in a dark space, when you go for a walk by yourself and without your phone, when you do such activities and such practices where it's only you and your thoughts, or it's only you and your sensations, or it's only you and nature, and you have nothing to distract from those things, you have no other particular place to look at or distract from. And in that very moment, in that very powerful moment, you can look at the unconscious thought in a completely different manner. And a lot of people think that they have to do something with their thoughts all the time. But I believe in my heart that if you can just distinguish an unconscious thought from a conscious thought, one coming from the lower self compared to the higher self, when you can just distinguish this, that's all you need. Because I ask people this, and I'll say this again. Would you allow a 5-year-old to tell you what the status of your physical health is? Would you allow a 5-year-old to tell you how you should be eating? Would you allow a 5-year-old to tell you what your future is going to be like? The answer is no. So, along those lines, why do we continue to believe these ideas and thoughts that feel like they're coming from a 5-year-old? And in truth, these kinds of thoughts have the cognitive rationale of a very young child. So the first thing we can do is accept them for what they are and let them pass. Let me stress this as well. When you start this, you're going to be very, very bad at it because you don't know what it's like to accept a thought and let it pass. Therefore, if you try too hard and if you come at this from a place of trying, then you will be disappointed in yourself and say, I just can't do it. This takes particular practice to separate yourself from those unconscious thoughts and to give your attention and your focus and your energy to thoughts that you are not only creating, but subtle thoughts as well. Subtle thoughts that come from the intuitive mind. Now, the second thing you can do with thoughts is replace one thought with a new thought. So how do we do this? By mindfully replacing what is often irrational with something rational based on aligning yourself with how you see yourself today. How you see yourself today, for most people listening to these podcasts, is different than how you used to see yourself. You used to see yourself as anxiety, and if you're experiencing anxiety now, for example, you may see yourself as someone who's going through an anxiety chapter. There's a big difference between I am anxiety and I do things that create anxiousness. When you say those two things to yourself, you get two completely different feelings. So we can replace one thought with a new thought. We can start to go, well, that thought aligns with the old me, and this thought aligns with who I am today or who I'm transitioning into for tomorrow. And this is important right here. As you go about the day, the question to ask yourself is, who am I aligned with right now? Because just by asking yourself that thought, you will move into a space where you start to go, well, I'm believing in thoughts and ideas that don't align with who I am today. And therefore, around that awareness, I can start to move myself in a new direction. So we can replace one thought with a new thought. Let me stress this as well, though. You mustn't look to bulldoze the old thought with a new thought. That's not how it works. Because if you're doing that, you're trying to bully your lower self or ego into changing its old perspectives, its old ways. If you try to bully this part of you, there will be backlash. There will be a deep sense of defensiveness that shows up from your old self. So we have to understand that we are building a new relationship with the lower self, and we are showing the lower self that it is now the higher self that will guide it, and it no longer has to take the reins in our lives. The third thing we can do with thoughts is strengthen a thought. How do we strengthen a thought? By investing emotion and behavior around a particular thought. A smile, a laugh, speaking about it to other people, acting in line with it, imagining it will all strengthen it. However, it must be done consciously and mindfully, or else the unconscious will do these things for you, and it will not align with your true self. That's for sure. So if we want to live a different life internally and externally, we have to learn how to strengthen a thought. If we get a thought that is connected to trust, meaning you can trust in your body to heal itself, you can trust in God to take care of this, you can trust that you don't have to deal with your future before it arises. Trust, for example, when you start to have that idea of trust and a smile comes with it, you are sending the signal that this aligns right now, right? Or if you talk about it to someone and you've got a certain degree of passion, now you're sending the signal that, yes, this is what I want more of. This is who I am today, right? So strengthening a thought is very, very important. And again, I will stress that this and all the other three things you can do with your thoughts all take practice. And because they take practice, it's important for you to be curious. It's important for you to be compassionate. It's important for you to be loving towards that side of you that still wants to take the reins and lead every aspect of your life. We're talking about the ego or the lower self now. So my friends, you are in control. You may have unconscious thoughts, but you are not your unconscious thoughts, nor do you have to follow them anymore. You also have conscious thoughts. Those are creative thoughts, creating who you want to be, creating the relationship within you. And I will also remind you of this. When you are going about changing thoughts, strengthening thoughts, allowing thoughts to be, if you can approach this process with a certain degree of enjoyment, going, I'm actually enjoying this transition, then you won't put so much pressure on yourself, number one. And number two, you will be tapping in to what's known as neuroplasticity, the ability to create new wiring in the brain. And this kind of playfulness, this kind of ease, this kind of a awakening is very important. So don't think about this as a chore. Don't think about your healing as a chore, but rather find some level of enjoyment around it, and I promise you that you will benefit mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Why is it important for you to understand what energy is? Because whether you are aware of it or not, it is affecting the way you perceive things, your emotional state, your behaviors, and even the way you see yourself. Because most people go about their day only believing in the physical, what they see, what they hear, what they feel, and anything beyond that they are not aware of. And if something is outside of your awareness, it is also outside of your control. So once we become more aware of the energetic phenomena that's taking place around us and affecting us, we can use that to better ourselves. So what is energy? Energy for me is kind of like a cassette tape that carries information. A cassette tape that carries information. And what's interesting to understand is that even things that we cannot notice are carrying information. The human energy field is an organized grid of information, and when one human energy field comes in contact with another, there is this unconscious conversation that tends to take place outside of a person's awareness. The question becomes, if one person is in a negative emotional state and another is in a positive one, which one starts to overtake the other? The answer comes down to which energy field has the most amperage, meaning the strength of that electrical current, the strength of that particular emotional state. The stronger the emotional state, the faster it will transfer from one person to the next, unless the person is mindful enough to understand what is taking place, and through their physiology, through their body, not their willpower, through their body, they keep themselves in a positive state. Now, this can be done through aligning through the breath, posture work, the speed in which one person moves, facial expressions, or any other physically led response. Energy healing, because we hear a lot about energy healing. Energy healing is like clearing clogged emotional plumbing. For myself, energy healing goes hand in hand with emotional healing and the release of emotions that no longer align with who the person is now becoming, the shift in identity. So when someone goes about energy healing, and they're partaking in some kind of an emotional healing work. We have to ask ourselves, is that person still aligned with their old identity? Because if you continue to identify with someone who will always suffer, someone who is unlucky, someone who doesn't deserve happiness, if you continue to identify with this kind of a person, then your energy and emotional healing work will be short-lived. Temporarily, you'll get this feeling of lightness and ease, like you just let go of some emotional baggage. However, within a short period of time, that baggage will come back because you have not aligned yourself with someone else. You are still living based on the programming that you've been under for so many years. Now, keeping emotional energy in your body requires energy. Often, the lower self, or ego, or subconscious mind, brings upon the idea of, how do I release these stuck feelings and emotions? When in truth, that part of you is just afraid of change. To heal it, you have to reveal it. And to reveal it, you must stop distracting yourself from it and allow it to be present. We're talking about the feelings, we're talking about the sensations, we're talking about the emotions, we're talking about the labels here. Now, allowing this to flow through you like a river and through your tears, releasing what no longer serves you, is what we want. We want to be expressive beings because that's what we were when we were children. It's unfortunate, though, that much of the world sees what I refer to as surrender sessions as being a part of some tradition or religion that they were brought up with, and therefore refrain from this daily practice. I urge you, however, to question that belief, because the only place a negative feeling can hurt you is when it's locked up within you. When you express a negative feeling, it's no longer locked up. And what I mean by expression is, you'll hear about this a lot, in my YouTube videos and in my sessions, and what we're doing at the Health Anxiety University is we work on expression. I'll get people into a hypnotic state, either mild or medium, sometimes deep, and we will get in touch with a certain person that has something to do with the negative feelings that the person's holding on to. And I'll tell them, this person is now across you in your imagination. If you were to tell them exactly what's been on your mind and stuck in your body for all these years, what would you say? And how would you say it? And they begin. For years, they've been hanging on to this expression, afraid of speaking up. And since the brain doesn't know the difference between something that's actually physically happening and something that's going on in your imagination with you passionate about it, what you're imagining is actually happening, and you are rewiring some of that wiring from the past. So energy healing comes in many different forms. Now, personal growth comes from significant emotional experiences, my friends, okay? You must understand this, because knowing something is not enough. It's not enough to know. Let's say you're suffering from anxiety. Most anxiety sufferers are already experts. They can write a book on anxiety, right? However, all that knowing does not translate into trust or into safety perceptions. And that's the biggest problem, because these people continue to look for more things to know about anxiety. They think the Holy Grail is in the next sentence that they read or the next video that they bring up in relation to anxiety. The answer is already within you, but you do not trust what it is you already know. We are not logical creatures, although we have that option at times when it's needed. We are emotional creatures, and the only way to cleanse ourselves of past negative energies and emotions with renewed emotions and energy is through having an emotional experience. Some people get there through hypnosis, some get there through taking psychedelic mushrooms, or they head into the jungle of Peru for an ayahuasca ceremony, some through surrender sessions, and some spontaneously through a certain action or behavior. The question is, what are you led towards? Your lower self or your ego will look to prevent you from this expression of emotion. However, it is up to you to realize that this part of you is no longer in charge. Let me say that again. Your lower self, your automatic responses, your ego is no longer in charge. You are the decision maker, okay? The conscious you is the decision maker. And now you are deciding that your higher self will guide you. And the higher self, the guidance from your higher self is completely different from the lower self. You can think about it as an opposite. For example, lower self likes to scream, higher self likes to whisper. And it's important to understand as you go about your day, where am I taking instructions from? Because the higher self comes from a place of cooperation, and it comes from a place of unconditional love, which all starts with you, of course. It comes from a place of care, and it comes from a place of clarity. Whereas when you think about the lower self, it's very loud, it's very frantic, it's very afraid and fearful, it's very angry, it's very irritable, right? And if you continue to allow this part to run your day, then you will continue to identify with what the lower self wants you to identify with. We don't want that. Now, what you focus on directs your energy. You focus on fear, doubt, anxiety, and you will have it. You focus on trust, faith, healing, unconditional love for yourself, and you will have that. It is your focus, my friends, that directs your energy. So it's a worthwhile practice to check in to see where your focus is turned to in any given moment. Since I now believe that even the focus of recovery from anxiety will still lead us to anxiety to some degree. Hence the need to see the anxiety recovery journey from the perspective of coming back to your true self. Now this way we become more broad-minded. We're open. We're accepting the wisdom. So you're not, if you're dealing with anxiety and listening to the Awaken podcast, you're not overcoming anxiety. You are moving towards your true self. You're finding that self again. You're bringing back pieces, parts of you that you've lost along the years. And this is that compassionate side of you that starts to show up. You start to go, I give myself permission to be at ease. And so it is. I give my body permission to heal itself. So it is. I give myself permission to align myself with people out there that are also on the same chapter, the same journey as I am. And so it is. Understand this as well, that many physical problems today stem from energetic imbalances. When we begin seeing our physical issues from this perspective, we can understand some of the motivations to why this has occurred and why the subconscious mind-body, the lower self, has a very real purpose behind keeping it there. That is, until it has been given guidance that letting go of this is possible and needed during this juncture in a person's life. So the subconscious is highly motivated to keep a certain disease, an illness, a sensation, a symptom there in place because there's a specific reason it's there. For example, an anxiety symptom tends to be there so that you don't take something on that may cause some kind of a mistake. Because this lower self likes to believe that you're perfect. It likes to believe that perfectionism is a part of you and the way you should be going about your days, not tippy-toeing around the world and not stepping on people's toes, for example, right? But this symptom, now, when we talk about the lower self, we're not just talking about the mind, we're talking about the body here. Right? Because the lower self is the mind and is the body. So we start to guide the symptom. We go into that cafe, right? And yes, we feel a rush or a flare-up of symptoms, which normally takes us down kind of a rabbit hole. But this time, for an anxiety sufferer, we're saying, we start to put our hands on the symptom, for example, and we start to bring safety and love into the picture. And we can repeat loving words, we can repeat safety words, we can slow down our speed, we can do all these different things to send safety signals to the system. And that's the practice, my friends. And the question of the day is this, okay? The question of the day in relation to what we're discussing today, what type of energy are you walking around with most of the day? And are you ready to consciously allow yourself to feel this in full in order to understand it and let it go? Maybe not right away, but piece by piece. This is where the surrender sessions happen. Surrender sessions are not about some kind of white light movement. Surrender sessions is finding yourself in a dark space, sitting or laying down, and inviting, key word, inviting the negative feelings, emotions, sensations, symptoms, disease, illness, whatever it is, inviting what you're dealing with to show itself, to prove itself through the body. And as you do that, you surrender. You're no longer frantically and mentally looking for an answer. You say, bring on the feelings, bring on the emotions, I surrender. Teach me what it is you're supposed to teach me. What is inner wisdom, first of all? Well, inner wisdom is a subtle voice. It is a nudge, an answer within, coming from your expanded awareness, your higher self. And this is based on an intention that you initially placed, either consciously or unconsciously. Now, in my own personal experience, my friends, I didn't even know that I had an inner wisdom. During my days of suffering with multitude of anxiety disorders, I thought that the voice that I had to follow was from an emotional level and was from the monkey mind that was incessant and nonstop. I thought that if I felt it, it was what I needed to follow. If I heard it in my mind, it was the truth. But little did I realize at the time that there was an inner wisdom within me, and it was always within me, that could be uncovered and could guide me into new directions. But the only way this inner wisdom was going to show up was if I brought myself to a place of emotional balance, number one. Number two, that I began to become more dispassionate towards the monkey mind within me. And I saw myself as someone different than how I grew up or the programming that I was under. So there were a couple of things that I needed to do that everybody needs to do in order for them to have a chance to release and reveal this inner wisdom within them. And this inner wisdom is kind of like a feeling of knowing rather than thinking that you know. So as we go about the day, we use the words, I think. I think this is the truth. I think this is what I should do. I think this is the right thing. But rarely do we use the words, I know. And we're so afraid to know and to put a period on something that intuitively feels so real to us that we continue to second guess ourselves and question what it is we already know within us. Now, to uncover this inner wisdom, I'm going to share with you a few things that I did on my own personal journey. And of course, there are so many different ways to uncover this inner wisdom in order for it to be the guiding force in your life from this time onwards. But I'm going to give you the things that worked for me more than anything else. The first one was identifying as a spiritual being. Instead of identifying as a human doer, for so many years I saw myself as a human doer. And when I talk about a human doer, I'm talking about someone who is always searching for something, always trying to prove themselves to other people, always looking to be acknowledged for the work that they do, always looking to play the numbers game, right? And the numbers game is kind of like, how many likes do I have online, followers, how much money am I making, these sorts of things, right? Playing the numbers game. So I had to start disidentifying with being a human doer and start identifying with being a spiritual being. Now, just because I'm saying spiritual being doesn't mean that you have to step outside of the direction that you're headed right now. It doesn't mean you have to go and purchase a robe and go sit in a cave and begin meditation even if it doesn't, correspond to the direction that you're currently headed. You don't have to do any of these fanatical things, right? These huge changes. You don't have to make these huge changes. But you have to begin identifying with more than the things that you're doing on a daily basis, is what I mean. Identifying as a limitless and intuitive spiritual being can help bring on a deeper knowingness towards things and inner wisdom. This doesn't mean you have to flaunt your newfound identity either, since this would only backfire in the bigger picture relating to spiritual growth and personal development, but rather simply knowing that you are beyond the instructions of that incessant monkey mind within you, and to see daily experiences in a different light than most other people do is a very good start. One example is this, okay? And here, the words that you want to make sure that you carry with you on a daily basis in order to begin identifying with this spiritual being is this: if it doesn't go your way, it goes the divine's way. Now, how does this connect? This connects to anxiety. We're living in an anxious world. And we live in an anxious world because the internet has created narcissists. And that's just the start of things. We need to understand that the very things that we're pulled towards as a herd is actually hurting us in the big picture. And so, what we need to understand is, if it doesn't go our way, it goes the divine's way. Meaning, within that experience, your ego or your lower self wants things to be a certain way, wants the outcome to be the way the ego wants it to be. That is very narrow-minded thinking. For example, everyone has to agree with my belief systems, okay? Let's take this perspective. And unconsciously, so many anxiety sufferers walk around on a daily basis with this perspective. However, we must also understand that if someone has a different point of view than yours, that must be respected. Because everyone is in a different chapter within their spiritual development. And that must be respected. The very fact that someone is courageous enough to listen to your perspective and to maybe question it and to think in terms of, does this align with what it is I'm working on, allows us to learn something new from that person's perspective. So, starting today, it's very important, I believe, and this is what helped me, is to begin to disassociate from and detach from thinking that you are a human doer. Because you don't get more points in life by doing more than the next person. As much as it may feel like that, because we are all in a state of fight or flight, so many of us are running around trying to accomplish things that we're not really passionate about, number one, and number two, that doesn't really contribute to the growth of this world, the beauty, the health of this planet. Now, the second thing I did, which a lot of people are going to be surprised, because with the Anxiety Guy podcast and the Health Anxiety podcast, you'll notice that in this podcast, I'll be talking about things that are a little bit beyond the scope of healing anxiety. And we're definitely taking a different kind of perspective towards that, of course, as well. Now, the second thing that I did to begin tapping into my inner wisdom was actually prayer. And a lot of people are going to go, well, Dennis, are you religious? I didn't know you were religious, right? And I know I'm going to get comments everywhere for this, but prayer can be a way of opening yourself up to a guidance from a higher power or your own inner wisdom. Therefore, when an individual is engaged in what they consider prayer, or involved with having conversations with or speaking to their God, whatever that may be, they are actually communicating with and activating the powers of their own subconscious mind. When we pray, and this was the power behind my prayer, when I prayed, I wasn't only praying to an external force that my senses couldn't pick up. I was praying to my own subconscious mind, and I was planting the seed. But when I was praying, I wasn't begging. If we beg, it cements the fact that we don't have it or deserve to have it. I prayed in a way where I already expected my prayer to come into my life. And so when you understand the power of prayer, you can understand that it's not I'm hoping for, wishing for, or begging for. It's I'm working with my subconscious mind, my subconscious body, to reveal information to me, to put me on a path that will eventually bring me towards a specific place of intention. And that's it. So prayer was a very powerful way for me to understand at a deeper level that it wasn't just about what I saw, heard, felt, tasted, and smelled. It went far beyond that. And when it went far beyond that, my old problems, those problems that used to be so big, turned into such tiny, minute things, And so that was a very, very important aspect to tap into my own inner wisdom. Then came, and this is going to be very interesting for some people here because we're going to tap into dream work. And why is it interesting? Because when you set yourself on the path of a spiritual developer, developing spiritually, developing energetically, what tends to happen is you tend to start dreaming more. And in the beginning, these dreams don't really make sense because the one that's trying to reflect and figure out what these dreams mean is the human mind. And the human mind is so limited in its ability to dissect things and come at it from a deeper perspective that it's almost pointless to try to think about what your dreams mean. Now, paying attention to your dreams and interpreting their symbols and messages can be a powerful way to tap into your inner wisdom. Because, and this is very, very important, the subconscious mind is always communicating with the conscious mind through dreams. Hence, a dream journal would be very beneficial in navigating the metaphorical and sometimes direct messages coming from the subconscious mind. So let me give you an example of this. Okay, this one here is very, very key. I remember that during my transition from being a human doer to being a spiritual being, or at least, identifying with someone more than just human form, I started to get this dream. And the dream was that I was in my car, okay, and I was in my car, and my car was starting to go backwards. And as it was slowly going backwards, there were people behind the car trying to push the car so it wouldn't continue to go backwards and eventually hit some kind of a building, a person, or whatever it may be. Now, in the dream, I had the opportunity to hit the brakes and to stop this car from going backwards and eventually hitting something. Now, I started to go, what an incredible dream. And when I started to dissect it from a deeper level, saying my subconscious is trying to send my conscious mind a certain signal, a message here, I started to realize that I was in the pattern of the addiction to suffering, okay, which was the car going backwards. And I had placed a certain degree of comfort within suffering that I wasn't ready to hit the brakes on. Now that, my friends, is the way we dissect these dreams, these messages. And I started to think to myself, well, Why am I uncomfortable? Why am I afraid of leaving this inner turmoil, the anxiety disorders? Well, living comfortably uncomfortable, right, for so many years was something that I got used to. I got used to the suffering. I expected the suffering. I expected anything that I did creatively, anything that I did in a relationship sense, anything that I partake in terms of a new activity, for example, back in those days, I realized that I was always expecting to fail. I was always expecting to be sabotaged in some way. And this dream made everything so real to me that I began to pay more attention. I began to pay more attention and give my focus towards what life was going to be like beyond the suffering. So yes, there was suffering. Yes, there were habits. Yes, there were patterns at a mental, emotional, physical, spiritual level. However, I didn't have to be a part of that anymore. And everything started with a choice. And it was scary to make that choice. And that choice led me towards practices that I needed to do in order to further myself away from that old anxiety identity and towards a more spiritual person. And these dreams became very valuable resources to look back on and to say, what am I still holding on to that I'm not consciously aware of yet? What is the subconscious trying to portray, trying to tell me? And the important thing is that when you get such dreams like this, it's not an opportunity for victimhood. It's an opportunity for deeper reflection. And your subconscious mind doesn't hate you. It's not trying to sabotage you mentally or physically. It's basically asking you whether we have to keep the same meaning behind things that we've kept for so many years. And this is the part that so many people don't understand yet. Because when they initially feel something, they think that that is the truth. And that's not the truth. In truth, that initial feeling is a question that says, are we going to continue to react the same way that we have before? Or is something going to change? And if something is going to change, make sure to bring about a certain degree of emotional intensity around that change so that us, the subconscious mind, can get a clear picture. Get a clear picture of this new path that we're going on. Now, the next thing that helped me to tap into this inner wisdom was somatic experiencing. Somatic experiencing. This involves paying attention to the sensations and feelings in your body as a way of accessing deeper wisdom and healing. Practices like body scanning, progressive relaxation, or even my surrender sessions on YouTube as guided meditations can help you tune in to the wisdom held within your body. One of the biggest differences that I made during the transition out of my anxiety disorders was to begin to use the body more in everything that I was doing in regards to my healing. And I realized that I couldn't get to a place where I was running from my sensations and symptoms anymore, or I was trying to mentally figure them out. No. I had to experience all the things that I was temporarily experiencing and running away from and distracting from for extended periods of time in order for the inner wisdom to show up in regards to what it is I was feeling. So that's where surrender sessions came from. That's where mapping came from on my YouTube channel. That's where body scanning meditations came from on my YouTube channel and my programs, because we need to involve the body in our healing work. This is so important. That's why when people come up to me and say, well, Dennis, I'm using this particular technique or this method or this or whatever it is, do you believe in this? Do you think it's good? Well, if it has a somatic component to it, I say most likely good, right? It's good because the largest part of the subconscious mind is the subconscious body. And in order to change the thought patterns, we need to change things at a physical level as much as we need to change things at a mental level, at an emotional level. So somatic experiencing the pain, experiencing the grief, experiencing the fear, experiencing the anxieties, experiencing the joy, experiencing the peace, experiencing the new direction of letting go and trusting in the unfolding of life. Somatic experiencing, very, very powerful. And finally, silence and solitude was the very practice that took me into deeper inner wisdom. And this really means carving out time for silence and solitude, which allows you to quiet the external noise and all the distractions, creating space for your inner wisdom to emerge. You can spend this time in quiet contemplation or reflection, or simply being present with yourself and your body. It's totally up to you. But understand that this world is very, very, very loud. It's loud in the way we see things. It's loud in the way we hear things. It's loud in the way we touch things and feel things. It's loud in terms of our taste buds. It's loud in terms of what we smell. I mean, you can go into a shopping mall now and you've got a billion different types of perfumes and this and all of that. It's just one example of how loud the world has become. And you cannot tap into this inner wisdom until you find silence and solitude. It's interesting how when you look at the direction the world goes and you decide to go in a different direction, how many sacrifices you're going to have to make along the way. However, those sacrifices will mean a lot to you in the beginning, but later on down the road, you're going to find that they were just tiny little things that you had to do in order to tap into the big picture. And the big picture is that you do have this unlimited inner wisdom within you, this subtle voice, this nudge, this answer within you. And it is so beautiful. Sometimes this inner wisdom, this nudge says, hey, you're a nobody, and it's fine to be a nobody. You don't have to continue to fight to preserve a reputation that other people want you to preserve. You don't have to continue showing the same face, saying the same words to people on a daily basis in order for them to continue to feel safe around this known identity. These are things you don't have to do anymore. By creating a certain degree of discomfort in other people, you're inspiring them to tap into their own inner wisdom. And that's important. Now, I believe that a person must be brought towards what resonates with them at that particular juncture in their lives. They must feel an emotional pull towards that particular teaching and connection, or else the wisdom through that practice can never be fully downloaded into the person. They will be nothing more than a human being walking around with a label around something that they are not thoroughly connected with. Spirituality has its time and place. Miracles have its time and place. And often, it's through a deep desire to connect with a spiritual force that brings with it the miracle the person needs. Spirituality then becomes the guide rather than the person themselves. And it is from this point, my friends, where intuition overtakes the reliance upon intelligence to move through this lifetime. It is from this point where forcefulness is replaced with allowance, and big problems from the past begin to look more like experiences that needed to happen just the way they have, in order for the person to slowly make their way back to the Godhead. And the Godhead is cooperative, not competitive. It is gentle, not forceful. Knowing, not thinking that we know. And trusting, rather than untrusting in the unfolding of life, good or bad. Spirituality is a gift that keeps on giving once a person begins to live more of a spiritual life. And this doesn't mean to flaunt your newfound connection. It means to live through it within your heart and to allow it to guide your actions no matter the situation. No matter the situation. From this place, we are no longer stuck in fight or flight, no longer stuck in the old patterns brought on by the ego mind, but rather we are seeing the truth of what we truly are underneath all the past layers of fear and emotional turmoil. We are. That's it, my friends. We are. We are not this, and we are not that. We simply are, and that is enough. That is enough. And as you step in to spirituality, you're basically also giving up a lot of your old ideas and belief systems that used to perpetuate your old identity. When you step into spirituality, you're stepping out of materialism. You're no longer so caught up in things that other people are caught up in. When you step into spirituality, you understand how limited the unconscious mind used to be. There used to be a time in your life where the unconscious mind used to direct you. It used to direct you in terms of how to feel about something, how to react to a situation, how to figure out who the person is that's looking at you through the mirror, how to even gauge your past, your present, or your future. All the directives used to come from this unconscious mind. And when you step into spirituality, you start looking back at that unconscious mind and realize how loud it really was. And it wasn't true, but it did keep you occupied. It kept you occupied in a way where you were always looking to preserve your reputation, always looking to wear a brand new suit for people out there that would appreciate you so that you won't be rejected by those people that care about themselves so much more than they care about you. Your happiness was dependent on how people responded to you. So you wanted to make sure that they responded to you in a way that was gentle. When you step into spirituality, you no longer care. You care at a very deep level for society. You care for the community. You care for the betterment of the world. However, you no longer care whether someone judges you in a positive or a negative light, because more often than not, those people are not ready for your presence. Those people are not ready for your awakening. Those people are not ready to hear what you have to say. And often stepping into spirituality means stepping out of the way collective society sees things. When you start to see things differently, when you start to realize that energy is a finite resource and you only have a certain amount of it, you start to look back and go, man, I used to give so much energy to these things, and it drained me and kept my unconscious mind alive, kept me centered in this ego-centered prison. Who was that person? And when you step into spirituality, you're much more protective, not in a frantic way, but in an aware way. I'm protective over my energy. I'm protective where my focus goes. I'm protective of who I hang around. I'm protective of where I hang around. I'm protective of what I do from one day to the next. And I am not willing to give up that energy for something that doesn't really matter in the big picture. Step into spirituality, give it a chance, and allow it to guide you. When you allow spirituality to guide you, you find that what you used to be afraid of was actually the very direction you needed to go. For example, darkness. For example, silence. When you sit in silence in a dark room, we used to be afraid of that, the uncertainties of what may occur. But what we were really afraid of was the ego mind looking. The ego mind is looking directly at us when there's no more distractions. And when there's no more distractions, and we're looking at the ego mind, it is naked. It is naked, completely naked, and vulnerable, very vulnerable. And we start to distance ourselves from all the directives of this ego mind, the irrational fears, the associations we had to our past, what may occur in our future, and the limits that we've placed upon ourselves. This ego mind becomes very vulnerable when we are alone, when we are meditative, we are in nature, when we are doing things that are no longer distractive. So as you step into spirituality, you're going to find that everything starts to change. And everything changes for the better, because stepping into spirituality means living a different life. You're no longer going for the walk in order to heal an anxiety symptom, for example. You're no longer joining a social circle to be liked by everybody. You're no longer doing these things. You're no longer meditating in order to release yourself of a particular idea. You do these things for a greater purpose, a greater cause. You go for the walk to feel that connection with nature, to feel that connection with Source. And from that place, you begin to download wisdom and information that you could never download when you were following the ego mind. You begin opening up to other people that are aligned with you, keyword, aligned with you. And the ones that aren't aligned with you, you start to plant a seed in this fertile soil of their own minds. You start to say something to that person and they don't understand it right away. But years later, they'll look back and go, man, I didn't really understand what that person was telling me back then, but now I do. I'm so happy that they said that. So your life starts to change, and your habits start to change, your patterns start to change, and people start to look different, and your past starts to look different, and your future starts to look different. And the most important thing when you step into spirituality is that there's no longer any clinging. You're not clinging to a desire. You're not clinging to a goal. You're much more present. You're much more content. You're no longer chasing things. You're no longer fighting for things. You're allowing things to unfold as they may. You respect the process of life. You even start to respect death. Imagine that. To respect dying. Now, when you can get to that place, you will truly be awakened, my friends. Alignment, a term many have heard but never fully understand. To be aligned is to allow source energy to enter into your life and guide you through its infinite wisdom. It's time to become awakened. Now, friends, in order to be in alignment, we must understand the concept of enlightenment. Enlightenment is not something that can be found or is even an experience. Enlightenment is the recognition of your true being. That's it. And when you finally, after you've exhausted all the doings to get to a better internal place, finally reach enlightenment, you realize that your inner peace was always within you and was never something you had to work for in the first place. This is the moment you become aligned with the universal mind. This is when the natural laws of this universe begin to work for you and with you. Now, in relation to identity, when we once and for all admit that this particular role that we've been playing, this act, this personality, can no longer give us what we truly want, we can then begin opening ourselves up to who we were always meant to be. Now, friends, it is at this point of recognition that springs forward intuitive inspiration to begin connecting with an energy source that knows what you already want and can give you that in abundance. I'm talking about unconditional love for yourself and inner peace, of course. However, understand that alignment with Source only arises once you've no longer taken credit for what you did, nor blame others for what they didn't do. Alignment arises once you realize that it is not you who achieves, but rather source energy that works through you. It is in these very moments, my friends, when we truly realize that alignment consists of allowing and being led by, rather than looking to mentally bully ourselves into understanding something that we don't presently understand. Alignment indicates a willingness to allow an unseen force to help you in your pursuit to moving from living as a human doer to living a more spiritual life. And what I mean by living a more spiritual life is this, is that you're not getting caught up in the everyday dramas of what's taking place in the world. You're no longer getting caught up in materialism. You're no longer getting caught up in the news. You're no longer getting caught up politically. You're living from a place where the most important thing for you is your relationship with a source energy that cannot be sensed through your five senses. So you move from a human doer to living a more spiritual life, and that doesn't mean that you have to place yourself in a compartment, saying it's got to be this religion or it's got to be these practices. No, the biggest power that I have is that I allow myself to take learnings, teachings from all previous teachers that have come and gone to this planet. I've adopted Christ consciousness. I've adopted the practices of Buddhism. I've dabbled with Zen. I've been here, I've been there. And I've taken what works for me and what helps me to continue to live a more spiritual life from one day to the next. Now, the ego mind is active when stress and self-victimization has taken over. If you allow the ego mind to direct you, you will never be in alignment. You will never be in alignment energetically. So that means that internally you will always feel unfulfilled. Externally, what's going to happen is your results will never be what you truly want them to be. You cannot live in a place of self-victimization, being led by the ego-centered prison, the ego mind, and expect yourself to live a spiritual life and be in alignment with what naturally comes to us. Alignment is allowance and not forcefulness. Many of us are so addicted to motivation these days, and we're addicted to motivation, which means that we're addicted to suffering, because motivation doesn't last. It's like a shower. You get clean for a few moments, then you get dirty again, and you need to take another shower. Now, we want to get to a place where we feel, very important word, to feel like we're allowing things to unfold more than we're forcing things to happen for us. And this is when you allow that external force that cannot be seen, that energy, to come into our lives and to bless us, that universal mind to bless us with what we truly desire, our goals and dreams for our lives. And isn't this the path to true inner peace and anxiety? Isn't anxiety trying to control every future occurrence? Isn't anxiety trying to protect from something that may go wrong? But who's the one that's telling us it may go wrong? The ego-centered prison, the ego mind. We've been led by this ego mind. Our belief systems are centered around the ego mind, and we haven't gotten to a place where we begin to question what it is the ego mind believes. Because this lower self or ego mind is only dedicated to one thing: familiarity. If it's familiar, even if it's bad for you, it would prefer that over an unfamiliar experience, an unfamiliar identity, an unfamiliar thought pattern, because change equals death to the ego mind. Now, alignment comes to fruition when we allow the outcome we seek to arise in any way that it may. Being out of alignment and living through the ego mind is wanting the outcome to manifest in one way and one way only. A lot of people out there complain about their inflexible bodies. But the truth is, the inflexible body is there because of an inflexible mind. And when your mind becomes more flexible, so does your body. And what we need to understand is that we have to be open to the result that we seek to occur in any way it's meant to. Let me give you an example of this. For years, I struggled with anxiety disorders, and I looked for answers. I dabbled with therapists. I did everything I could. But the truth was, I had to become an anxiety coach in order for me to once and for all overcome my anxiety disorders. Isn't that incredible? And at the time, I never thought I would be coaching people with anxiety. Never. No. I didn't even know what anxiety was. So I started to slowly peel the onion, get to the root of the problem, and through coaching others, I began to give myself permission to begin believing in what I was teaching other people. I began to identify with it. I no longer saw myself in it as an anxiety sufferer. I saw myself as a student of life. And as that student of life begins to take in wisdom and information and applying it into their own lives, they turn into the teacher themselves. And I never realized that healing was always within me. It wasn't something that I needed to create, something that I needed to chase. No. It was always within me, but there was layer upon layer upon layer of fear that prevented me from tapping into who I truly was within. Too often, we're trying to become someone. We're trying to chase an outcome, create these goals and desires for ourselves, when in truth, what we really want is already within us. Now, alignment puts spirit before the mind and the body, since spiritual health would then positively affect what is beneath it, which is the mind, which is the body, lessening the power over old negative thought forms and getting us to a place where the body starts to cleanse itself. The only reason why we don't experience these physical miracles that we hear regularly, but we don't experience them, because the mind is in the way of that physical healing. When we get the mind out of the way through specific spiritual practices on a daily basis, and we become militant over those things, further strengthening our relationship with source energy, we get to a point where we start to let go and allow things to unfold, and we no longer rely on mental fixation to solve our own problems. This is when awareness is heightened. And if awareness is heightened, then alignment is strengthened. This is important for people to understand because, for example, anxiety sufferers will say, well, I'm tremendously aware. Well, you're aware of what the ego mind wants you to be aware of, and that is of catastrophe, future catastrophe. The ego mind wants to continue to blame your parents over how you feel today. Your ego mind wants you to believe that in this present moment, no matter where you are or who you're with, there's some kind of a threat lurking right around the corner, and therefore you continue to live in a state of fight or flight. And if you continue to live in a state of fight or flight, how is that allowing you to connect with source energy in order to manifest things that you truly deserve to manifest in your life, such as inner peace, such as ease? Awareness is becoming aware of how the ego mind has been leading our lives for far too long. The old programming starts to lose its power over us. And as that old programming starts to lose its power over us, we have to make a decision, a courageous decision, a decision that starts to move us away from the overstimulation that you come in contact with on a daily basis in our modern world. Because if you continue to follow the thought patterns of society, you will always be caught up, number one, and you will always be clinging, number two. And when I mean clinging, I'm talking about clinging on to some kind of a result that isn't here yet. And if you continue to look to cling to a result that isn't here yet, how can you live within inner peace? How can you live with a sense of ease within you? You cannot, because that ease and inner peace already resides within you. It's already within you. And you will begin to see it as you begin to let go and focus your attention more often to whether you are aligned with this universal mind, with source energy, with whatever it is that you'd like to call God. The dark night of the soul is when you have lost the flavor of life, but have not yet gained the fullness of divinity. So it is that we must weather that dark time, the period of transformation, when what is familiar has been taken away and the new richness is not yet ours. I believe that personal experience is the most powerful way of interpreting what's going on within the human body, the human mind, within the spirit of a person. And I want to start with my own personal experience in relation to awakening out of unconsciousness and my own dark night of the soul, which actually was heightened during those periods of deep panic and anxiety. Often these times with an anxiety disorder are the times of the dark night of the soul, where a person is going through a period of final unselfing and the surrender to the hidden purposes of their divine will. And as you can see with anxiety, with my anxiety, I was completely fixated on what could go wrong. I was waiting for the right time for me to be creative and enjoy life again. I was always waiting for a time where someone else could give me permission to start living my life in a more easeful manner, where inner peace took over inner franticness. And I began awakening out of that unconsciousness when I started to realize that it was unconsciousness. Because for a very long period of time, I believed that anything that was brought forward unconsciously was what I was supposed to act upon. Meaning, if there was an idea, a perception over a particular symptom or sensation in my body that said, what if this could be an illness or a disease or something that could physically go wrong in the next 10 seconds, I believed that that was truth. I believed that as I went about the day, if I felt angry, that I was angry. I felt like if something was going to go wrong in the future in terms of an experience that felt unfamiliar, that was the truth, that was what is about to happen in my life. So as you can see, I gave so much emphasis and credit to unconsciousness for so many years. I don't know about you, but right now in your life, there's a good chance that you are being led by unconsciousness. And it wasn't until I realized that all of this unconsciousness, all of this ego mind, all of this franticness, all of this subconsciousness was all coming from a place where I had stored certain core beliefs around who I was and what life was about, that it was completely separate than who I truly was deep down below the fog. Because there was a fog. There was a fog every single day when I started meditating, my meditative practices. There was a fog not allowing me to be in touch with source energy and that unconditionally loving place that I find myself in today during my meditative practices. The fog was there as initial feelings as I went about the day, trying to protect from anything that could go wrong, internally or externally, in terms of protecting my friends, my family, or experiences that would not go the way I wanted it to, until I realized that if something doesn't go my way, it goes the divine's way for a very specific purpose that I can only understand later on in life as I stay on this very narrow path called healing. In a real dark night of the soul, it is always 3 o'clock in the morning, day after day. F. Scott Fitzgerald, and it's true. day after day, the pain, the suffering, the discomfort, the confusion, the bewilderment, every single day. As I mentioned, it is a period of final unselfing. Unselfing. Carl Jung put it perfectly when he said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own soul. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Awakening out of unconsciousness, my friends, is to no longer be led by the beliefs of your conditioned self, and begin opening up to a whole new way of seeing all that is connected in life, through acceptance and through the love of God in all things good and even bad. It was incredible how I stopped compartmentalizing things, how I stopped judging people and experiences that I was having. And that doesn't mean that I just gave up on life. It meant that everything was connected, and in truth, I realized that we are all the children of that source energy, the children of God. Therefore, if I judged another person wrongly, fiercely, for something that they said or something that they did, that was a mirror effect that would come right back to me in my own core belief systems and integrating into my identity. So I stopped judging. I stopped labeling. I stopped being so hard on people. I stopped looking to be perfect in every which way. I stopped trying to control other people, control external circumstances. I allowed everything to be as I do today. And there is no more good or bad, but there is consciousness. There is a higher level of awareness that takes me, that will take you, out of that initial frantic reaction to experiences and into full acceptance and the awareness that it needs to unfold this way. The experience needs to unfold this way. We start becoming less interested in unveiling what we think is true, becoming something we are currently not, and keeping up with the latest worldly happenings. We start heading down a narrow path of militantly living in line with what feeds our soul, not what feeds the ego mind. And from here, we can give back to others without wanting anything in return. And isn't that the key? When you can get to a place where you're giving back and not expecting anything in return, isn't that what true unconditional love is? It is not so much an experience at first, as much as it is a set of realizations that start to color all our life experiences as we move away from unconsciousness and towards higher levels of consciousness. It is the realizations that start to reshape who we really are. It's the moments of clarity that we get based on staying on this narrow path. And trust me, this path can be long and arduous, this spiritual path, this reconnection with the divine, this realization that we are deep down infinite beings. And I don't want to say these things in a way that is woo-woo, but I do want to say them in a way where we start realizing that so much of our external programming that has become internal over our years and even past lives have made us believe things about ourselves that are not true. And we get to a point in our lives, my friends, where we stop and we realize, hey, this isn't fulfilling anymore. It's just not fulfilling being this person. I think Ram Dass called it a spacesuit, where the moment he came to this world, people wanted to put a specific spacesuit on him. And as he went about his life, he went from one spacesuit to another, meaning one type of identity, one type of career choice, one type of worker, one type of way of seeing himself, herself. Doesn't matter. We take the spacesuit off, we become naked, and all of a sudden, everything starts to look different, and we start to separate ourselves from all the fighting, all the clinging. And notice that word, clinging. Clinging to a specific result that you really, really want to happen. Clinging to a need for control. Clinging to a specific person, to a person that's come into your life. No, these people are meant to come. And if they're meant to go, they're meant to go in any which way that they leave. No more clinging. More awareness. More allowing. Are you living a life from a place of awareness and therefore from the level of your soul? Or are you living life from a place of fixation, therefore from the level of your unconsciously created beliefs? The difference, my friends, is massive. Your continued inner growth depends on this, and it's time to become awakened. During this journey back to the Godhead, which is a place where we recognize our divineness and creator consciousness in all we've become, we become increasingly aware of the fact that we are awareness and that we've unconsciously been led to fixation. It's interesting that for so many years in my life, I struggled. And I was addicted to suffering. I found suffering through all sorts of different ways. If it wasn't from food, it was from a type of friendship. If it wasn't from a type of friendship, it was from a specific kind of dramatic TV show. If it wasn't from there, it was from social media. But I found suffering in some way. And it wasn't until I realized that I was awareness and nothing more than that. I was deep down within me, aware of what the unconscious sides of me were pulling me towards. I was always aware, but because the unconscious sides of me picked up so much momentum and was so very well practiced in keeping me fixated on a result, fixated on clinging to a specific desire, fixated on how I wanted things to go, fixated on competition and the fact that I always came first no matter what. I lived my life from this vantage point for so many years. And then I brought myself through practices that were very spiritual centered, such as meditation and different forms of meditation, through specific breath work, through imagery practices, and through very well-guiding mentors in my life. I was brought to a place where it was real. It wasn't so much familiar. It was unfamiliar. It was uncertain. And this place of awareness, rather than fixation, was a place where I couldn't identify myself. I simply couldn't identify who I was becoming. And that scared me. It scared me to be simply aware of what was taking place internally and externally. It scared me to not think that I was the body or I was the mind. It scared me to see what was going on around me without attaching anger, irritability, or anything like that based on what was taking place around me and within other people. And to you I say this: once you can no longer identify yourself, you've taken off so many layers of fear in your life that have started even before you got to this planet. And these samskaras that we reveal and we heal have depth to them. They are very deep, these unconscious beliefs, these suppressed feelings, these associations, these identities that we carry with us on a daily basis. They're deep. And if we look to heal these things from the perspective of the ego mind, from the perspective of unconsciousness, then that's simply a trick. A trick that brings us full circle back to overstimulation, to fixation, to clinging on to results, and so on and so forth. And so, our goal must be to bring ourselves back to a place where we begin to become more highly aware of the tendencies coming from the lower self, the ego mind. And that response from the ego mind, that bodily sensation, that intrusive idea, that fixated association, that fear, can now become something different, because it's no longer who we are, but rather it becomes a part of who we used to be. And once we start to recognize that all these things, these rituals, these patterns, these habits from the ego mind are in fact patterns, well-conditioned and well-practiced patterns, once we become aware of those things on a regular basis, a very beautiful thing starts to happen to us. We start to distance ourselves from all the noise. And when we distance ourselves from all the noise of the modern world, then we tend to find ourselves liking the idea of isolation more and more. We tend to be drawn towards nature, which in fact is a very important sign of your spiritual awakening. Nature becomes more important than anything. Silence becomes more important than anything, because when we are silent, in a silent place, and all the noise, all the chitter-chatter from the outside is gone, only then can we really hear what the message is in relation to our new-found moments of clarity. We can hear the guidance. And from this place of guidance, our whole belief systems can change. What we used to believe around spirituality or anything like that starts to change. Our interpretation of God starts to change when we are met with repeated times of silence, when we visit nature as a friend of ours and we start connecting more deeply. You are awareness. You are not fixation. Fixation is clinging on to. Awareness is opening up to. And as you understand this more deeply, and as you connect more deeply with your own awareness on the inside, you will start to detach from those belief systems that were brought on unconsciously into your life. And this is a beautiful thing. I urge you to really reflect on where you are in your life right now and whether you are truly at peace and happy. Because if you aren't, and if you continue to feel high degrees of being triggered by things going on, then that just means that you have to look deeper within you and no longer point the finger to anyone or anything on the outside. It's asking for guidance. It's asking for connection. It's asking for love. It's asking for guidance, guidance, guidance. And so much of your guidance depends on being clear, mentally clear, emotionally clear, and physically cleansed. Because that's when your soul starts to speak. So be awareness. Don't be fixation. Awareness is who you really are. And through awareness, you can begin to defy the orders of your ego-centered mind, the ego-centered prison. And through this path, this very straight and narrow path, you will begin to find yourself once again. Many of us have experienced moments of inner guidance or intuition where it feels like a divine presence is speaking to us. But how do we distinguish between this voice and the voice of our ego, which often seeks validation, control, and self-preservation? When I refer to God's voice, I'm talking about the universal wisdom and guidance that comes from a higher power, whether you perceive it as the divine, the universe, or your own higher self. This voice, my friends, often communicates messages of love, compassion, and alignment with your soul's purpose. Now, on the other hand, the ego-centered voice stems from our individual identity and is driven by fear, insecurity, and the need for control. It tends to be louder and more insistent, often leading us down paths that serve our immediate desires rather than our long-term well-being. Can you see the differences here? So the important question is, how can we differentiate between these two voices in our daily lives? One key distinction, my friends, is the energy behind the message. God's voice resonates with a sense of peace, clarity, and expansion. It doesn't demand attention or validation, but gently nudges us towards growth and evolution. Now, in contrast, the ego-centered voice tends to be frantic, very, very demanding, and driven by fear. The ego-centered voice thrives on validation and often leads to feelings of anxiety, doubt, and confusion. Notice which one of these voices you have been following and allowed to lead your life recently. This is some powerful insight. Now, of course, let's say you're faced with a major decision, like whether to pursue a new career opportunity. God's voice might guide you through a deep sense of inner knowing and alignment, reassuring you that this path is in harmony with your soul's purpose. You might experience synchronicities, signs, or a feeling of serenity and trust that confirms that you're on the right track. Now, even if the decision involves uncertainty or risk, there's a sense of divine support and guidance every step of the way. The ego-centered voice might manifest as doubt, hesitation, or a relentless stream of what-if scenarios. It could amplify fears of failure, rejection, or not being good enough, leading to feelings of anxiety and paralysis. Instead of feeling guided by a higher power, you might feel overwhelmed by pressure to make the right decision based on external expectations or societal norms. Now, this voice often clouds our intuition and distorts our perception of reality, and this makes it difficult to discern the best course of action. So, it's really about tuning into the energy behind the message and discerning whether it aligns with love or fear. This is so important that I'm going to say it again. As you go about the day doing your mindful work, your authentic work, it's important that you tune in to the energy behind the message and you discern whether it aligns with love or fear. If it aligns with love, that's God's voice. If it aligns with fear, that's the ego-centered prison many times. Now, by cultivating a deeper connection to our own inner wisdom and learning to differentiate between God's voice and our ego-centered voice, we can navigate life's challenges with greater clarity, confidence, and peace of mind. Now let's explore 3 very key aspects of why you may be isolated at this juncture in your spiritual journey, because when I go back to my own personal experience, I actually felt like I had to move my whole family from one particular place to another, and as I did, I found that there was a sense of boredom creeping in, a sense of non-fulfillment, a sense of the world quieting down, and it was up to me to kind of interpret that experience any which way I wanted to. So instead of going, well, where's all the noise? I started to think, well, maybe there's a deeper reason behind this that has something to do with my own purpose in this lifetime. And I want to dive deep into these 3 particular reasons for this isolation that may be happening in your life or somebody you know right now. The first one is that you are being kept from outside negative influences during this time of isolation. Sometimes the world can be a noisy and chaotic place, filled with distractions, negativity, and influences that pull us away from our spiritual path. Now, by isolating you from these outside influences, Source Energy is creating a sacred space for you to focus inward, away from the noise and the chatter of the external world. This isolation allows you to attune more deeply to your inner guidance and intuition, and it fosters a stronger connection with your higher self and the divine. So as you can see, you are being kept from outside negative influences right now because in a way you've been chosen. All that noise on the outside does not align with the path that you've decided you want to be on. And because that's the case, you're going to find that you run into experiences that are different. They feel uncertain and unfamiliar. And it's up to us to embrace these things and start to build trust around what Source is trying to do for us right now. The second thing is that Source energy, or God, is trying to keep you aligned with spiritual practices daily, all right? So in the hustle and bustle of everyday life, it can be very challenging to maintain consistent spiritual practices. Now, by isolating you, Source is providing you with the opportunity to prioritize and deepen your spiritual practices on a daily basis. Whether it's meditation, or prayer, or journaling, or mindfulness practices, this time of solitude allows you to cultivate a more profound and intimate relationship with the spiritual practices that nurture your soul and elevate your consciousness. This is a beautiful time in your life, this isolation. It really is. Because what tends to happen is our union with God, our union with Source, tends to become the priority after we realize how fleeting these fun experiences can be during this lifetime. And once we start to lose interest in that roller coaster of emotion that we feel on a daily basis in our outside world, we start to go inwards and look for more fulfillment. And that fulfillment comes from this union with Source, this union with God. And in order to reach that place of deep spiritual awakening and even enlightenment, my friends, we have to be, and here's the word, militant with our spiritual practices daily. And this is our priority now, because this isolation has very important reasons behind it. And one of the biggest reasons is to elevate your spiritual practices right now, to elevate, to take it to a deeper level and more consistently. And the third reason why you're being isolated right now from the outside world is to detach you from the attachments of the world. The attachments and distractions of the material world can often hinder our spiritual progress. This keeps us bound to the cycle of desire, attachment, and the addiction to suffering. Now, through isolation, Source is inviting you to detach from these worldly attachments and desires, freeing you from the chains of materialism and ego identification. And this period of solitude for you offers you the opportunity to reevaluate your priorities, release what no longer serves your highest good, and deepen your surrender to the divine will. As challenging as it may be to navigate periods of isolation on your spiritual journey, trust that Source energy has a divine purpose and plan for your growth and evolution. I want you to embrace this time as an opportunity for deep introspection, inner transformation, and spiritual renewal. Even in moments of isolation, you are never alone. The divine presence is always with you, guiding you, supporting you, and illuminating your path. So until next time, keep seeking, keep growing, and stay awakened. Bye-bye.